What if I told you that 5 months could change your entire life, and all it takes is your voice? Hi everyone. Welcome back to LMJ English, where we help you grow your English through powerful, emotional, real-life stories. If you want to improve your English while being inspired, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story we upload. Starting point: 5 months ago, Jake was a 26-year-old software engineer from Brazil, young, talented, and full of potential. His hands were skilled at writing clean code, building complex systems and solving problems that others couldn't. On paper, Jake had everything a top tech company could ever want. But there was one thing missing, one silent, invisible barrier. That kept him from reaching his dreams. He couldn't speak English, not just a little. He couldn't even form a basic sentence without pausing to think, translate and second-guess himself. A simple phrase like, "How are you?" made his heart race. Speaking in English felt like being asked to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Every time he heard native speakers talk, it was as if their words were flying past him at lightning speed. He could catch a few, but the full meaning, lost. And that feeling of not understanding, of being left out, wasn't just frustrating, it was painful. Jake had always dreamed big. Since his teenage years, he had imagined himself working at a global tech company, coding with the best minds, earning a salary that could support his family, traveling to conferences around the world. That dream kept him awake at night and woke him up early each morning. He believed that talent and hard work would be enough to get him there. And then one day, it happened. He received an email that made his heart skip a beat. "Congratulations. You've been selected for an interview." The sender was a well-known US tech company, one of the giants. Jake could hardly believe it. He ran to tell his parents, his friends, anyone who would listen. He imagined the life that was waiting for him, working in New York or San Francisco, building exciting new apps, having meetings in English like a true international professional. But reality had a different plan. The day of the interview arrived. Jake wore his best shirt, set up his laptop and logged into Zoom early. He took deep breaths, smiled at himself in the webcam and whispered, "You've got this." But as soon as the screen loaded and the 3 interviewers appeared, smiling, confident and native English speakers, his confidence vanished. They greeted him warmly and jumped straight into questions. "Jake, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your experience in software development?" Their words sounded fast and unfamiliar, as if someone had pressed a fast-forward button on their voices. Jake froze. His mind was racing in 2 languages, Portuguese and English, trying to find the right words, trying to remember the phrases he had memorized months ago. But nothing came out clearly. Yes, I am software. I do coding, many projects are good," he stammered. The silence that followed was deafening. One of the interviewers smiled kindly, trying to hide the awkwardness. They asked another question. Jake didn't understand it fully, but he nodded and tried to answer anyway. More broken English, more hesitation, more silence. After just a few minutes, one of the interviewers politely ended the call with a line Jake would never forget. "All right, Jake. Thank you for your time." He knew what that meant. He hadn't failed because he wasn't smart. He hadn't failed because he lacked technical skill. He had failed because he couldn't communicate, because he couldn't speak the language of opportunity. The door, too, his dream life, had been wide open, and then it slammed shut in his face. That night, Jake sat alone in his room, staring at the ceiling. His laptop was still open, the Zoom window quietly glowing in the corner of the screen. He felt embarrassed, defeated, angry. For years, he had told himself that English wasn't necessary, that his talent would be enough. But now, he saw the truth clearly. English wasn't optional. It was essential. Without it, he would always be the brilliant mind in the background, never fully seen or heard. And it was in that moment of heartbreak that Jake made a silent promise to himself, a promise that would change everything. I will learn English. And I will learn it fast. Turning point. The morning after the interview, Jake sat on the edge of his bed, staring at nothing. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. His laptop, still open on his desk, displayed the last email he received. "Thank you for your time, Jake. Unfortunately, we have decided to move forward with other candidates." A sentence so polite, yet it cut through him like a knife. His chest felt heavy, not because the job was gone, but because something deeper had been exposed. For the first time in his life, Jake realized that talent alone wasn't enough. His coding skills, his long nights of practice, his hunger for innovation, all of it had been rendered powerless by a simple truth. He couldn't communicate in English. He couldn't share his ideas. He couldn't show the world what he was capable of. And that, more than anything, broke his heart. He closed his eyes and let the memory of the interview wash over him again. The three interviewers, kind but professional. The fast-paced English that felt like a blur. The moment he opened his mouth and nothing came out except broken words and empty pauses. He had known the answers. He just couldn't express them. He wasn't nervous about his skills. He was ashamed that language had become his greatest weakness. The rejection didn't just bruise his ego, it awakened something inside him. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside. The city of São Paulo buzzed with life. Horns honked in the distance, people bustled on the sidewalks, and the sky carried the weight of another humid Brazilian morning. But in that moment, it all faded into the background. Jake wasn't just thinking about himself anymore. He was thinking about why he needed to rise. His eyes drifted to a framed photo on his shelf. His family, smiling in front of their small house in the countryside. His father, with tired eyes and strong hands, had always told him, "Your mind is your ticket to a better life." His mother, gentle and wise, had given up so much to give Jake the chance to dream. And his little sister looked up to him as if he could do anything, and he had let a language, a tool, stand between him and everything they had sacrificed for. That was the breaking point, but also the turning point. Jake took a deep breath, clenched his fists and whispered words that didn't come from his mouth but from his soul. "This will not be the end of my story. This is where it begins." He made a promise to himself, one that went beyond career or pride. He wasn't just going to learn English to get a job. He was going to master it because it was the key to a door that had slammed shut in his face. And next time he knocked, he would walk through it with confidence. From that day forward, Jake no longer studied English casually. He studied with purpose, with fire, with the face of his father in his mind, the soft voice of his mother in his heart, and the future he still believed in burning brightly ahead of him. This wasn't just about learning a new language. This was about reclaiming his voice, why traditional methods failed. With a burning desire in his chest and a promise echoing in his mind, Jake knew he couldn't waste time. He had to act, and fast. His first instinct was the most natural one: go back to what he already knew. He reopened an old online English course he had once paid for, back when he thought just doing something was enough. It had a sleek design, cheerful instructors, and the kind of promises that made your heart race. Speak like a native in 90 days. Master English through 10-minute lessons. At first it felt productive. He followed the curriculum religiously. Every morning he sat at his desk, headphones on, repeating flashcard words out loud. Apple, chair, teacher, hospital. He memorized verb conjugations. He aced every grammar quiz. The app cheered him on with little stars and motivational messages. You're a champion! Fluency is just around the corner. But there was a quiet problem. Jake wasn't speaking. Not really. He could complete fill-in-the-blank exercises with ease. He could explain what a gerund was. He could match vocabulary words to pictures and recite rule after rule. But when it came to speaking a full sentence, an actual sentence, in front of a real person, his mouth refused to cooperate. One afternoon, after weeks of textbook-style learning, he ran into an American tourist who asked, "Excuse me, do you know where the subway is?" Jake's eyes widened. His heart pounded. His brain scrambled to organize the correct English response, but all he managed to say was, "Subway, you go." No. The tourist smiled politely and walked away. Jake stood frozen, humiliated. How could this be happening? He had spent hours, days, weeks learning English. He had scored 98% on the course tests. He could recite present perfect continuous tense like a grammar wizard. And yet, when life asked him a question, he had no answer. That night, back in his room, Jake sat in silence. The digital confetti from the app's lesson complete screen still glowed on his laptop, but now it felt fake, like a hollow reward for a race he wasn't winning. He started thinking deeply, not just about what he was doing, but why it wasn't working. The truth was clear. He wasn't learning how to use English. He was only learning how to study it. Just like in school, where students memorize formulas, but struggle to solve real-life problems, Jake had memorized the language but couldn't live it. He remembered a quote he once saw: "You don't learn to swim by reading about swimming. You learn by getting in the water." And suddenly it all made sense. He had been sitting at the edge of the pool, reading about strokes, watching others swim, analyzing water temperature, but he had never truly jumped in. Traditional methods had given him structure, yes, but not voice, not confidence, not connection, and that's what he really needed. A method that wasn't just about passing a test, but about speaking with heart, thinking in English, and communicating with real people in the real world. So Jake made another choice, a bold one. He closed the app, he put away the flashcards, and he said out loud, slowly, clearly, as if speaking to the version of himself who had just started this journey, "English isn't something I study anymore. It's something I live." And from that moment, he stopped chasing fluency like it was a finish line in a classroom. He decided to make it a way of life. His 5-month method, first 15 days. Jake didn't have time to waste, and he knew it. After years of passive learning and recent heartbreak, he decided to build something new, something that actually worked. No more waiting for someone else to hand him the key to English. This time, he would build the door and the key himself. He called it the first 15 days, and this phase wasn't about theory, it was about survival. His mission was clear: forget about becoming fluent for now. First, he needed to become functional. So instead of downloading another app or opening another grammar book, Jake did something radical. He sat down with a pen, a notebook, and one powerful question. If I landed in an English-speaking country today, what sentences would I absolutely need to survive? No teacher had ever asked him that. But he asked himself, and the answers flowed. Hi, how are you? Can you help me? I don't understand. I'm learning English. Where is the bathroom? I need a coffee, please. By the end of that morning, he had written down 50 real-life, everyday sentences, short, simple, and essential. He called them his survival sentences. But writing them down was just the beginning. Every morning, like clockwork, Jake stood in front of his mirror and read all 50 sentences out loud, 10 times. His reflection became his teacher, and the small room became his training ground. At first he stumbled. His mouth couldn't keep up with his brain. Words like please and understand stuck to his tongue like glue. But he kept going. Day after day, repetition began to create rhythm. Rhythm gave birth to fluency. By day 5, the awkwardness faded. By day 10, he wasn't just reading them, he was owning them. But Jake didn't stop there. He knew language couldn't just live on paper or in front of a mirror. It had to live inside him. So he added a new rule. Talk to yourself. All the time, in English. And he did. When he brushed his teeth, he said, I'm brushing my teeth. This toothpaste tastes minty. When he cooked, he narrated, I'm frying eggs. The pan is hot. I like this smell. When he walked outside, he observed aloud, the sky is blue, I see people, that man is wearing a green jacket. Was it strange? Maybe. But to Jake it was freedom. For the first time he wasn't learning English from a book, he was learning it from his life. Soon, his thoughts started forming in English without effort. He no longer needed to translate everything from Portuguese. English words became his words, but there was still one more piece to this powerful beginning: sound. Jake knew that fluency wasn't just about words, it was about how those words sounded. So he turned to something he loved, movies and TV shows, and used them in a brand new way. He picked short scenes where native speakers had natural conversations. He played one sentence, paused, then copied it. Exactly tone, emotion, speed, accent. If a character whispered, he whispered. If they shouted with joy, he shouted too. If they laughed between words, he laughed. It was no longer imitation. It was immersion. And he didn't stop at one take. Sometimes he practiced the same line 15 or 20 times until his voice matched the original like an echo. He called it his mimic mission, and it became his favorite part of the day. After just 15 days, the changes were impossible to ignore. He could say everyday phrases without blinking. He didn't freeze when thinking in English, and most importantly, he had built something no grammar lesson had ever taught him: confidence. Jake had walked into his English journey with doubt, but after 15 days of speaking out loud, talking to himself, mimicking real conversations, and connecting words to his daily life, he had created a powerful foundation. He wasn't fluent yet, but he was no longer afraid. And sometimes, that's where fluency really begins, after 15 days, real practice. The first 15 days had planted the seed. Jake could feel it growing. He no longer stumbled over basic phrases like, "Can you help me?" or "I don't understand." His tongue, once stiff and unsure, now moved with a little more rhythm. He no longer feared the sound of his own voice in English, but he knew that speaking short sentences wasn't enough, not for the life he dreamed of. He wanted to speak with depth, with personality, with confidence. He didn't want to just survive in English. He wanted to live in it. So he turned the page and entered the second phase of his method: real practice. And this time everything changed. Jake began this phase by asking himself a question: one that would shape the way he practiced from that moment forward. How do children learn to speak their native language? They don't start with textbooks. They don't memorize grammar rules, they talk. They ask questions, they repeat what they hear, they make mistakes. And they learn through doing. That realization became the heart of his new system. The first technique Jake used was something he invented and refined daily, the question-answer method. Every morning, he would open his notebook and write down 5 simple real-life questions in English. What did you do today? What do you eat for breakfast? What's your favorite movie? What do you like to do on weekends? Who is someone you admire? Then he would answer each question out loud, but he wouldn't stop at one sentence. No. Jake had a rule: expand. Always expand. At first, his answers were short. I ate eggs. But then he pushed himself. I ate eggs and toast. Then further. I ate eggs, toast, and a banana because I was really hungry. Even more. I ate eggs, toast, and a banana because I was really hungry, and I like to eat a big breakfast when I have a lot of work to do. This practice trained his brain to think in full ideas, not broken fragments. It gave his thoughts shape and voice. He wasn't just building sentences, he was building fluency, one idea at a time, and he didn't stop there. Jake committed to 30 full minutes of speaking out loud every single day, no matter what, rain or shine, tired or energized. Even if he had nothing to talk about, he would describe his day, his dreams, the food he cooked, or even the weather outside. This wasn't classroom English anymore. This was life practice. But Jake didn't just want to speak. He wanted to sound natural, like someone who belonged in the conversation, like someone who could walk into a room full of native speakers and not feel out of place. So he revived one of his favorite techniques from earlier days and made it even more powerful, the echo technique. Every day, Jake chose a short clip, sometimes from a movie, sometimes from a YouTube video, sometimes a podcast. He listened to a single sentence, he paused, and then, like an echo in a canyon, he repeated it. But not just the words. He copied everything: the tone, the emotion, the speed, the personality of the sentence. If the actor whispered, Jake whispered. If the speaker laughed, Jake laughed too, even if he didn't understand the joke yet. He did this every day for 20, 30, sometimes 40 minutes. It became his favorite ritual, and over time something incredible happened. His pronunciation began to shift. He stopped sounding like a student trying to imitate English. He started sounding like a speaker living it. But Jake knew that words were the bricks of a language, and fluency needed many of them. Still, he had no interest in going back to dry vocabulary lists. So, he created something brilliant: the story method. Each day, he picked 5 new words. Not random ones, but words he had recently heard in conversations, movies, or podcasts. Then he sat down and crafted a short story using all 5 words. The stories didn't need to be perfect. In fact, sometimes they were strange or funny, but they stuck. Example. Words: excited, invitation, party, arrive, surprise. His story: I was very excited because I received an invitation to a big party. When I arrived, I got a huge surprise. It was my birthday. Then he read the story out loud 10 times, just like his survival sentences. Later, throughout the day, he looked for moments to use those words in his thoughts and his self-talk. If he was feeling happy, he'd say, I'm excited. If someone texted him, he'd think, it's like an invitation. His brain started connecting English to life, not just to study time. And slowly but surely, it all began to blend together. The questions, the answers, the echoes, the stories. They weren't separate exercises anymore. They were all part of the same beautiful system, a system Jake had built with his own hands and voice. By the end of this phase, Jake wasn't just someone who practiced English. He was someone who spoke it with confidence, with rhythm, with purpose, and the best part, he was only just getting started, advanced practices. By now, Jake's English had gone from a quiet whisper to a confident voice. He could hold basic conversations. He could describe his day, express his opinions, and respond without freezing. But he knew fluency wasn't the finish line. It was a landscape. And if he wanted to explore every corner of it, he had to go deeper. So Jake entered the third stage of his journey, what he called the advanced practice phase. This phase wasn't about speaking more, it was about thinking differently, thinking in English. Jake realized something powerful. Real fluency doesn't start with the mouth, it starts with the mind. If your thoughts are still trapped in your native language, English will always feel like a translation, and translation is slow, clunky, and exhausting. So Jake trained his brain. Wherever he went, he narrated life in English, silently in his mind. As he walked to the store, he said, "The weather is nice today. That woman is wearing a yellow dress. I see a dog chasing a ball." When he stood in line, he thought, "I'm waiting to buy bread. The line is long. I hope they still have coffee." At first, this inner narration felt strange, even forced, but with time it became second nature. His thoughts no longer came in Portuguese. They came in English, short, simple, direct, but most importantly, natural. To take it further, Jake started writing in English every night. Just a few sentences at first, then full paragraphs. He called it his daily journal. He wrote about everything, his day, his feelings, his goals. He didn't worry about making mistakes. He just let the words flow. "Today I felt tired, but I'm proud. I spoke English for 1 hour without stopping. I even used new vocabulary. I still make mistakes, but I feel stronger every day." This daily habit gave him more than practice. It gave him clarity. He began to notice the structure of his sentences, the flow of his thoughts, and the patterns in the language. He saw where he repeated himself. He spotted phrases that felt awkward, and slowly he refined them. But Jake wasn't just writing. He was also listening, carefully and constantly. He returned to one of his most powerful tools, shadowing. But now with a sharper focus. He didn't just want to echo sentences. He wanted to match the full music of native speech, the tone, the rhythm, the breath, the emphasis, the pauses. He picked interviews, movie dialogues, TED Talks, anything where English was alive and emotional. He listened to a sentence, he paused, then he repeated it immediately, trying to copy everything. Not just the words, but the feeling behind them. If a speaker said, "I don't know what you're talking about," with sarcasm, Jake said it, the same way, over and over, until it felt real in his mouth. The results were stunning. Within a few weeks, his accent softened. His speech became more fluid. Native speakers started telling him, "Wow, your English sounds really natural." And for Jake, that was one of the greatest compliments he could receive. But there was still one mountain left to climb: grammar. Jake didn't want to sound like a robot. He wanted to speak English the way people actually speak it. So instead of going back to grammar textbooks, he became a language detective. Whenever he heard a sentence he didn't understand, especially if it sounded different from what he had learned in school, he wrote it down. For example, he once heard, "I've been learning English for 5 months." But in school he was taught, "I am learning English for 5 months." That difference bothered him. So he researched. He watched videos, read forums, listened carefully to native speakers, and what he discovered changed everything. He learned that grammar in real life is fluid, emotional, and driven by context. People don't always follow strict rules. They follow meaning. And once Jake understood the meaning behind the tenses, the why, not just the how, his grammar improved naturally. One of his trickiest challenges was prepositions. On the bus, in the car, at night, in the morning, by Friday. They all blurred together, so Jake began collecting them like clues in a mystery. He carried a small notebook and wrote down every confusing preposition he heard, always with an example. I was on the bus when I saw her. He's in the car waiting for you. We'll meet at night, not in the morning. Over time, patterns began to appear. He stopped memorizing rules and started noticing usage. Listening became his grammar teacher, and his grammar stopped being something he feared. It became something he felt. Through journaling, mental narration, shadowing, and observation, Jake began to unlock the most important skill of all. He stopped learning English. He started thinking in it, and with that, the final walls began to crumble. He was no longer studying the language. He was living inside it, confidence building. Fluency isn't just about knowing the right words. It's about daring to use them, even when you're unsure. Jake had reached the point where English was no longer a puzzle. It was a tool. But like any tool, it only worked if he picked it up and used it fearlessly. This next phase of his journey wasn't about technique. It was about courage. Jake realized that all his hours of practice, shadowing, journaling, and thinking in English meant nothing if he stayed silent when it mattered. The biggest wall standing between him and true fluency wasn't vocabulary. It wasn't grammar. It was fear. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of sounding foolish. Fear of people judging his accent or laughing at his errors. But Jake made a choice. He whispered it to himself like a vow. I will speak, even if I speak imperfectly. And that simple decision changed everything. He began with small moments. When he went to a cafe, he ordered in English. When he saw a tourist on the street, he offered directions. If a stranger said, hello, Jake responded with more than just a smile. He started a conversation. At first, it was terrifying. He stuttered. He mispronounced words. Sometimes he said something completely wrong and only realized it hours later. But you know what surprised him most? No one laughed. In fact, people smiled. They listened. They appreciated the effort. Some even said, your English is really good. And with each interaction, something inside Jake grew stronger, his voice. But he wanted more. He wanted a space where he could speak freely and frequently, with people who understood the struggle of learning a new language. So Jake went online and searched for English-speaking practice groups. He found a community of learners from around the world. People from India, Turkey, Japan, Colombia, Egypt, all gathering to talk, learn, and grow together. The first time he joined a group call, his hands were shaking. His voice cracked when he introduced himself, but the moment someone replied warmly, "Hi, Jake, nice to meet you," his fear melted. This became a new routine. 3 times a week, he logged into English-speaking Zoom rooms. They discussed simple topics at first, hobbies, food, daily routines. But over time, the conversations became deeper. Dreams, culture, relationships, fears, and goals. Jake no longer felt like a student. He felt like a global citizen. To strengthen his speaking muscles even further, Jake picked 10 common conversation topics and made them his personal speaking curriculum. These were the kinds of questions that came up in almost every conversation. What do you do for work? How was your day? What do you like to eat? What's your favorite movie? Tell me about your family. What do you do in your free time? What's your biggest dream? Have you ever traveled abroad? How do you spend your weekends? Why are you learning English? Every day he practiced answering one or two of these questions, out loud, in full sentences, with energy and emotion. At first he stumbled through them, but after a few weeks his answers became smooth, natural, confident. He wasn't just answering questions anymore, he was telling stories, and with each story he became more connected, not just to the English language, but to who he was becoming. Fluent, fearless, free, breakthrough. It started on a quiet evening. Jake stood in front of the mirror, just as he had done many times before. But this time something was different. As he spoke aloud, describing his day, asking himself questions, answering them, he noticed there were no pauses, no translations in his head, no mental rewinds trying to find the right words. The English flowed naturally, smoothly, confidently. For a moment he stopped and stared at his reflection. "Did I just speak fluently without thinking?" he whispered. He smiled, then laughed, because the answer was yes. It had been 5 months since that crushing interview, the one that broke his heart and lit a fire inside him. Since then, Jake had poured every ounce of his time, energy, and emotion into mastering English. He had spoken to himself in quiet corners, written countless pages in journals, practiced shadowing until his throat went dry, and opened his heart in online conversations with people he had never met before. And now he was fluent. But fluency wasn't the only thing he had gained. He had built something deeper, self-trust. To test his progress, Jake did the bravest thing he could think of. He joined an online discussion group where participants talked about global issues, economics, culture, technology, emotions. These weren't easy topics. They required nuance, vocabulary, and fast responses, the kind of English that wasn't found in textbooks. As he joined the session, a voice inside him whispered, "What if you're not ready?" But another voice, stronger, steadier, said, "You are." The conversation began. Jake listened. He understood. And then he spoke. Not hesitantly, not carefully, but fully, confidently, naturally. He expressed his opinions. He used advanced phrases he didn't even remember learning. People listened, nodded, smiled, and asked him follow-up questions. It wasn't just a conversation, it was a confirmation. Jake had become the version of himself he had once only dreamed about. And then he did the unthinkable. He reopened the email from that same US tech company, the one that had rejected him months ago. He read it again, not with pain, but with purpose, and he clicked the button that had once made his hands shake, apply. This time there was no fear. He prepared answers, practiced technical questions, rehearsed his story, and more importantly, he didn't hide from the language, he embraced it. The day of the interview arrived. Jake sat in front of his laptop wearing a calm smile instead of nervous sweat. The Zoom screen flickered, and 3 familiar faces appeared, recruiters, professionals, native English speakers, just like before. But this time, everything was different. They asked, "Tell us about yourself," and Jake told them, not in broken pieces, but in full, flowing paragraphs. He spoke about his projects, his growth, his passion for coding, and even about how he had learned English in 5 months. They listened closely. They didn't just hear his English, they heard his story. He answered every question with clarity, confidence, and connection. And when the interview ended, one of the interviewers smiled and said, "Jake, your progress is incredible. Thank you, we'll be in touch very soon." 3 days later, his phone rang. "Jake," the voice said, "congratulations, you got the job." For a few seconds, Jake said nothing. Tears welled in his eyes. His legs trembled. The world around him blurred. He had done it. Not only had he conquered English, but he had turned rejection into redemption. His starting salary, $5,000 a month, more than he had ever dreamed of making, more than anyone in his family had ever earned. The first thing he did, he called his parents. "Mom, Dad, I got the job," his mother cried on the other end. His father, quiet man, not known for big emotions, simply said, "We always knew you could." That moment meant more than any paycheck. With his first salary, Jake bought his father a watch he had always admired but never bought for himself. For his mother, a delicate gold necklace, something beautiful for the woman who had given him everything without asking for anything in return. When he handed them the gifts, they tried to refuse. "We don't need this, son," they said. "But," Jake smiled and replied, "I do. This is my way of saying thank you for believing in me even when I didn't." And in that quiet, teary-eyed moment, everything made sense. Every late night, every word repeated, every sentence whispered to himself in the dark. Every mistake, every doubt, every second was worth it. Because Jake didn't just learn English, he learned how to rewrite his story. Core lessons learned. Jake's journey wasn't just about learning a language. It was about learning how to believe in himself again. And now, standing on the other side of the mountain, fluent, fulfilled, and fearless, he looked back and asked himself one question: what made the difference? It wasn't magic. It wasn't money. It wasn't moving to an English-speaking country. It was a set of powerful, life-changing lessons. Lessons he now wanted to share with every learner who felt like giving up. Mindset is crucial. The biggest shift didn't happen in Jake's mouth. It happened in his mind. In the beginning, his thoughts were full of doubt. "I can't speak English. I'm not good at this. I'll never be fluent." Those thoughts created fear. And fear created silence. But one day he changed the script. He started telling himself, "I'm improving." Not "I'm perfect," but "I'm getting better." That small change changed everything. When you replace "I can't" with "I'm learning," the pressure disappears. You give yourself permission to grow, and in that space confidence is born. Immersion matters. Jake didn't just study English. He surrounded himself with it, completely. He changed his phone's language to English. He watched only English YouTube channels. He followed English-speaking creators on social media. He listened to English music while cooking, while walking, while resting. Every object he saw became a vocabulary word. Every moment became a learning opportunity. English wasn't something he did part-time, it was part of his life. And when you do that, fluency stops feeling like a goal. It starts feeling like home. Speak from day one. So many learners wait for the perfect moment to speak. They think, "I'll start talking when I learn more grammar, when I know more vocabulary, higher, when I sound better." Jake did the opposite. He spoke from day one, even when he knew only a few words. He spoke to himself, to strangers, to online partners. He made thousands of mistakes, but each mistake made him stronger. Fluency isn't born from silence, it's born from brave, broken sentences. So speak. Speak early, speak often, speak anyway. Active learning works. Jake didn't learn by watching others. He learned by doing. He repeated sentences aloud. He shadowed native speakers. He wrote daily journals. He created silly stories with new words. He asked himself questions and answered them out loud. He didn't just consume English, he created with it. And that made all the difference, because the brain doesn't remember what it watches. It remembers what it experiences. Consistency beats perfection. Jake didn't have perfect study days. Some days he was tired. Some days he was busy. Some days he didn't feel like practicing. But he did something every single day, even 5 minutes, even 1 sentence, because Jake knew it's not about doing everything, it's about doing something. Fluency is not built in one giant leap. It's built through small steps, repeated endlessly. Jake's story may be over, but yours is just beginning. If you ever feel lost, if you ever feel like you're too far behind, just remember, you don't need to be perfect, you just need to keep going, because fluency isn't a gift, it's a decision. Final message. Jake stood at the top of his mountain, not with pride, but with gratitude. Not just because he had learned English, not just because he got his dream job, but because he had discovered something far more powerful along the way, that anyone can do this. Yes, you can. You don't need to be gifted. You don't need to be rich. You don't need to travel abroad. What you need is something simple, but rare. Discipline. Jake's transformation wasn't made by luck or talent. It was made in moments that most people ignore, speaking to himself when no one was watching, writing when no one would read it, practicing even when his progress felt invisible. It was made in small acts of daily courage. It was built in mistakes, and in the decision to keep going after each one. He wants you to know, fluency is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If you stay consistent, speak even when you're unsure, and make English part of your life, everything will change. You'll express yourself more clearly. You'll unlock new opportunities. You'll connect with people you never imagined meeting. You'll walk into rooms with confidence and out of them with pride. But most of all, you'll prove to yourself that you can grow beyond your fears. So don't wait. Don't wait for the perfect method, the perfect teacher, the perfect time. Start with what you have. Start where you are. Start now, because fluency begins the moment you stop saying "I wish" and start saying "I will." Jake's story is not just his own, it's a mirror. And if you're ready to see your own reflection in it, then repeat these words. I can do this, because you absolutely can. If this story touched or inspired you in any way, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to support LMJ English. Your engagement helps us bring more powerful, meaningful stories to learners around the world. 20 key vocabulary, repeated throughout. Fluency, the ability to speak a language smoothly, naturally, and without hesitation. In Jake's journey, fluency wasn't just about knowing words, it was about being able to speak without translating. In his head. Confidence, a strong belief in your own ability. Confidence is what Jake gained as he practiced more and overcame his fear of making mistakes. Consistency, doing something regularly, even when you don't feel like it. Jake became fluent not because of one big effort, but because he did small things every single day. Mindset, the way you think about yourself and your learning. Jake's biggest change was not in grammar. It was in changing from "I can't" to "I'm improving." Practice the act of repeating something in order to improve. Jake learned that speaking every day, even to himself, was one of the most effective forms of practice. Mistake something that is not correct. Jake made thousands of mistakes, but he used each one as a stepping stone to grow stronger. Shadowing, a method where you repeat what a native speaker says immediately after them, matching tone and rhythm. This helped Jake sound more natural. Echo technique. Similar to shadowing, this method focuses on repeating sentences with the same emotion and pronunciation to improve speaking skills. Survival sentences. Essential sentences used in everyday situations. Jake created 50 basic phrases to use in real life and practiced them daily. Immersion. Surrounding yourself with English in every part of your life, movies, music, thoughts, conversations. Jake didn't just learn English, he lived in it. Translation, turning words from your native language into English. Jake learned to stop translating and start thinking in English. Repetition, doing or saying something over and over to remember it. Jake repeated sentences, vocabulary, and speech patterns to build fluency. Breakthrough. A powerful moment of sudden progress. Jake's breakthrough came when he realized he could speak without thinking or translating. Storytelling. The act of creating stories to remember vocabulary and express ideas. Jake used the story method to make new words memorable and emotional. Vocabulary. The words you know and use in a language. Jake expanded his vocabulary not through memorization, but through context and usage. Real-life usage. The way language is used naturally in everyday conversations, not how it's written in grammar books. Jake focused on learning how people actually speak. Fearless speaking. Talking without fear of judgment or mistakes. Jake trained himself to speak, even when he was nervous or unsure. Exposure, being around English often and in different forms. The more Jake exposed himself to English, the more familiar and natural it became. Self-talk. Speaking to yourself in English as a way to practice. Jake described everything he was doing, thinking and feeling to himself throughout the day. Transformation. A deep and lasting change. Jake didn't just change his language skills, he changed his mindset, his future, and his life.